To open to God, you have to first open to life. You have to live, you have to love, you have to enjoy and share. And this thing opens one layer on the other. You can't open to God unless you have been responsible and disciplined in your life. Because one thing builds on the other. Spirituality is based on the value that you express successfully in the physical world. And you start doing that by seeing in other people God, by opening and sharing and being responsible and serving. And if you don't have the capacity, fake it. Do until you get used to doing, until you get rid of the paralysis in your heart and your hand, and you begin to feel maybe 6 months later that the doing has given you a reward. You have to do to prime a pump. You have to put your heart and soul to prime a spiritual being. And it has to cost you. And it's unbelievable to live it. It is dramatic, it is wonderful, it is deeply satisfying, and you really have a great deal of satisfaction because you have something to share. But to have a spiritual life, you have to share that. And a lot of you are trying to share, like a piece of leftover pizza pie. It's cold and it's tasteless at this point. You work, you make something delicious in yourself, you have something which can attract something wonderful. You will have a wonderful life if you work. But the other way, it becomes something which you hardly want. How do you expect to share it with anybody else?
Rudy was a big, round, powerful-looking man with a head shaved bald, who always wore a saffron T-shirt and jeans and had a somewhat impersonal manner. But I remember vividly, after visiting the store and spending a half an hour talking with him, that when I left, I felt as if I was experiencing a severe sunburn. But unlike an afternoon at the beach, this sunburn was internal. It was intense and disconcerting, and when I got home, I had to lie down for what ended up being a 12-hour nap. One time I was invited, with my then-wife Barbara, to attend one of the sessions he held with his students. They were held at his apartment above the store. We had no idea what would transpire. Every teacher operates differently, and all I knew was that Rudy was pretty unique and that anything could happen. When we got there, a group of students were already present, just hanging around with each other. Rudy started talking to Barbara and me, and after about 10 or 15 minutes, the group of students, at what seemed like some unspoken signal, very slowly started gathering around Rudy, mostly sitting down, but some standing. And Rudy then proceeded to pull on his head as if extracting something from deep inside himself. And then he would fling this unseen substance at his students. The results were shocking, to say the least. After being struck by one of these invisible thunderbolts, his sitting students would fall back on their heads. The standing ones careened backwards, smashing violently into pieces of furniture, and then became disoriented, and some almost comatose for minutes at a time.
Shaktipat literally means the descent of power, and Diksha means initiation. In the tradition of Siddha Yoga, Shaktipat transmission is an act of grace by a guru who is able to transmit this divine energy to the student and awaken their Kundalini Shakti, the inner spiritual energy. Shiva resides in the Sahasrara chakra and Shakti in the Muladhara chakra. Shiva and Shakti are manifestations of the all-in-one divine consciousness, and when they are awakened to each other and united, one can find liberation and bliss. Kashmir Shaivism is a non-dualistic school of thought that emerged in Kashmir in northwest India. From about 850 to 1100 CE, Kashmir was the spiritual, cultural, and intellectual center for some of the most sophisticated spiritual practitioners of the time. Kashmir Shaivism arose from the experience of Trika Yoga practitioners, who also happened to be skilled in expressing their experiences. Shaktism is famous for its multiplicity of yoginis and goddess names and forms, such as Kali, Tara, Saraswati, Mahalakshmi, Tripurasundari. Yet all these goddess names and forms are understood to be aspects of the one supreme dynamic principle of the universe in its various active and creative manifestations. This picture represents the Shakti Mandala of Para, the highest goddess of the Trika tradition. The concept of the guru being the transmitter of spiritual grace, Anugraha, is emphasized in several Hatha Yoga and Tantra texts. All the lotuses and knots are split open when the sleeping Kundalini is awakened by the grace of the Guru, Hatha Yoga Pradikapa, 3rd chapter. Abhinavagata Tantra Loka outlines the degrees to which Shaktipat is absorbed with the student. It states that the descent of the energies is classified into 3 groups: Tivra, strong; Madhya, medium; Manda, low or weak grace. Each descent stimulates a degree of energy in the practitioner, and that practitioner might find a different level of absorption according to the guru and the circumstances. The term Kundalini was adopted into Hatha Yoga and became widely used in the Upanishads in the 16th century. It refers to our individual spiritual energy, capacity, and consciousness. Kundalini energy is technically explained as being sparked when prana and apana meet at the Manipura chakra. From here, it travels through the spine, passing all 7 of the chakras. In Shaiva Tantra, various practices like pranayama, bandhas, mantra recitation, and tantric ritual are used in order to awaken the spiritual power, which leads to a state of bliss and spiritual liberation known as moksha. The spine is called the Sushumna Nadi, and the columns either side are the Ida and Pingala Nadis. In Hatha Yoga, there are around 72,000 nadis, or as Swami Muktananda calls them, nerves. Coincidentally, there is said to be about the same number. It says in the Hatha Yoga Pradikapa, practices of Hatha Yoga should be learned exclusively with a guru. The lineage of Swami Muktananda from the Nityananda ashram in Ganeshpuri, India, has made the practice of Shaktipat transmission popular. Bhagavan Nityananda, one of the most worshipped Siddha Yoga gurus, was born with the full realization of his divine nature. People came from all over the world to sit with him and meditate. This is an account from Swami Rudrananda, one of his students, upon his first encounter with the saint.
For hours, and his energy opened in me, my need. And this is really how life is for all of us, that we live next to that energy which we need to find our answer.
In 1971, after much preparation and anticipation, Rudy brought his guru Muktananda to America. Rudy, who had been teaching the Kundalini Shaktipat meditation above his Oriental antique store in Greenwich Village since the 1960s, was the first American to be named a Swami. Upon entering the U.S., Muktananda revolutionized the practice of Shaktipat transmission, so much so that they would give Shaktipat to crowds of thousands of people at a time. In his book, Play of Consciousness, Muktananda talks about the divine power transmitted by the Guru. Lord Nityananda, the Supreme Guru, the Master of the Siddha Yogis, transcending all beyonds, dwelling in Siddha Loka, is the supreme deity of worship for Muktananda, and comprises his most inner self. I live by his kind favor. His divine power of grace abides in my heart, spreading throughout my body. The blissful divine Shakti, Chitti goddess, expanding as the universe, is the noble Kundalini. She lies coiled up in Muladhara and regulates the functions of the different parts of the body. When she is awakened by the Guru's grace, she improves one's worldly circumstances according to one's destiny, cultivates supreme friendliness among people, inspiring them to look upon each other as divine, and thus transmutes this very world into a paradise. She perfects whatever may be imperfect in one's world. Swami Muktananda. Since Shaktipat Diksha had been a relatively esoteric practice between guru and disciple, it was this transformation of the practice that brought about modern Siddha Yoga. After Muktananda's death in 1982, his successor, Swami Chidvilasananda, or Guru Mai, and leader of the Siddha Yoga Institute, still encourages the student to seek this initiation from the Guru as it is passed through a lineage. She has continued to make this accessible to all that seek it and has changed the ashram guru lifestyle into a more mainstream, day-to-day living practice. In the center in Santa Monica, there is a place of spiritual sanctuary called Shaktini Laya, where one can sit and meditate in divine bliss. Shaktini Laya means the abode of Shakti. Shaktipat Diksha is believed to come from a guru's touch, but also from their statue or a picture. There are many places where people go to receive this spiritual experience. Statues of Nityananda and Rudrananda exist in shrines to give worshippers a place to sit and meditate. Rudy passed down the tradition of open-eye Kundalini meditation to his students through the images and pictures of the Guru placed on one's altar. An infamous account of Shaktipat transmission came from a controversial man named Franklin Jones. He was a self-proclaimed guru with no specific lineage and went by many names including John DeFree or Adi Da. Coincidentally, in his search for a spiritual practice, stumbled into the studio of Swami Rudrananda in New York City, where he became a student and learned of the Kundalini Yoga and Shaktipat practices. His claim to enlightenment was that he was suddenly struck with Shakti energy while visiting the Vedanta Center in Los Angeles, California. He found himself in a permanently realized state, which he called the bright, similar to accounts of the Shakti energy or heat from the experiences of those in the presence of the gurus. Unfortunately, there are many accounts of sexual misconduct on both Muktananda and John DeFree, and perhaps it just goes to show that spiritual liberation does not free one from all rules of conventional morality. I say conventional because there is a strange phenomena of power that overcomes a person in a deeply esoteric state. And after all of my experience, I still truly believe that we are only ever human at best. A divine relationship with God is pure liberation, to realize oneness with self and God, to live free and prosper.